Good morning. Yes, I'm Tim Hill with GlobalData. I'm just going to do my share screen now. And I'm going to be talking about drinks growth in Southeast Asia, identifying growth, country and demographic opportunities with flavors, tastes, and health preferences. So let me just scroll on. So I'm going to be talking about which countries are most likely to have the positive health growth forecast for drinks, which ones are going to be most favorable towards foreign brands, which ones are the most health conscious, whether males or females are likely to be reading labels and shopping accordingly, which generations are the most health conscious and what do they look for in drinks, and then how important are sustainability and social issues in ASEAN or Southeast Asian markets. And what I'm going to be looking at is the intersection of three mega trends that we follow in GlobalData. So there's the sustainability and ethics one, which is this green train line here. The well-being one, which is this gray one here. And then the sensory and indulgence one, which is the red line here. And I'm looking particularly at some of the intersection points of these trends, because these make up some of the big 43 trends that we in GlobalData track in order to understand what is likely to be happening in our global markets. So first off, looking at the growth projection. So on the left, we're looking at, for the food service sector, the pub, club and bar sector, we're looking at alcohol consumption through the prism of 3-year compound annual growth measured in volume by litres. And what we can see from this is that, as expected, the region is going to be underperforming during the pandemic, start of some recovery in 2022, but really the major recovery is coming in 2023. And Philippines is going to be a strong rebound, we expect, for pubs, clubs and bars and alcohol consumption in 2023. And then on the right, the soft drink consumption in restaurants, the 3-year compound annual growth rate, again in litres. Again, we see the underperforming of the whole region due to the coronavirus. And then the start of recovery, 2022, 2023, with Thailand experiencing the strongest recovery and Indonesia being a bit of a laggard there. So staying with the pubs, clubs and bars and the alcohol consumption, I'm going to kick off by looking at lifestyle trends around drinks in Southeast Asia and focusing firstly on the alcohol sector. So what we found with the question, do you drink alcohol? How often do you drink alcohol? Consumers in Singapore, Vietnam and Philippines are most likely to drink more than the Asia Pacific average here. And against, we see the global average is 37% occasionally, 21% regularly, or regularly for both is 58%. So this is where the people more likely to be drinking alcohol. And let me just go to the next one. What we find in this is that the older generations, the boomer generations, are likely to be drinking more, likely to be drinking regularly, either regularly or occasionally, more so than the others, and actually way more so than Gen Z. The younger ones don't seem to be quite so much into their alcohol until they make it to the millennial generation, it seems. Within the region, when we ask how often do you consume food or drinks in pubs, clubs or bars, Singapore and Vietnam consumers are most likely to be found in these places. The global average for this is 11% for daily and a few times a week. And when we look at it by generation, here it's the Gen Ys, and to an extent the Gen Zs, although the Gen Zs aren't drinking that much alcohol, but they're most likely to be consuming F&B at pub, clubs and bars, particularly males in the 25 to 35 age range. Looking at preferences for brands now, so for the non-alcohol brands, we find that foreign brands are really the most popular in Southeast Asia, more so than at the bottom we've got the Asia Pacific average here. And you can see in dark green the foreign brands here. People are quite interested in that, perhaps with the exception of Thailand's, whereas also private label in black does seem to be fairly popular. For alcohol, foreign brands really do dominate though, and you can see this is the Asia Pacific average on the bottom, and you can see most of the ASEAN countries here outperform the Asia Pacific average in terms of their preference for foreign brands. When it comes down to generation, for the non-alcohol, the Gen Y and the Gen X do seem to particularly favor foreign brands. And when it comes to the alcohol, it's the Gen Y, the X, and the boomers who particularly favor the foreign brands. And these are the guys who are likely to be spending perhaps a bit more as well. Looking at juice, Indonesian consumers who are not big consumers of alcohol, of course, they're likely to favor premium juice brands. And Thai and Vietnam consumers are likely to buy larger quantities. So we've got here I buy large portions in light green, and dark green I buy high-end or premium versions of these products. So you can see here the Indonesians really outperforming the Asia Pacific average in terms of their consumption for juice and for premium juice brands in particular. Gen Y, they're particularly likely to favor the premium brands. And when we looked at this by gender, it was particularly males aged 25 to 34 who are likely to be spending more in this area. When we asked about, are you looking to increase your consumption of food and drinks that contain fruits and fruit juices, what we found was that the Malaysians, Filipinos and Indonesians say they are particularly keen on fruit-based drinks, followed then by the Vietnamese, much more so than the Asia Pacific average. Singaporeans seem to be slightly less concerned. We see this as a bit of a trend, and we'll see this in some of the later slides. And when we looked at it by generation, here it was the millennials who were looking to do this, and particularly females aged in the age range of 25 to 34, trying to increase consumption of fruit and juices in their drinks. When we look onto the less healthy drinks, we find the Thais are dominating this. How do you describe your spend on carbonated drinks? And Thailand's saying, yes, we're going to buy large portions, buy more frequently. And then in dark green, they're going to buy more likely to buy high-end premium versions. And we can see a lot more so than the Asia Pacific average here, whereas other parts of the region, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, performing on par with the average or actually less than. The millennials and Gen Zs are the ones who are going to be buying the most in terms of the large volumes and also the premium brands. Particularly what we found was the males like the unhealthy fizzy premium brands. For coffee, Philippines consumers, they buy a lot of coffee. Indonesian consumers are buying the premium brands. So the dark green is the premium brands, and the light green is the buying large portions or buying more frequently. Looking at it by generation, it's the Gen Ys who are buying large amounts, more so than the rest, of premium coffee. When we looked at it by gender, it was working age females, particularly in the category 25 to 44, who are going to be spending a lot on premium coffee. Looking at coffee flavors, this is an interactive screen grab that I've done from the GlobalData Intelligence Center, where I said, and I just did the selection for the 6 main ASEAN countries that we've been focusing on. What coffee flavors do you prefer? What's interesting was that sweet dominated 49%. The global average for this was quite different, actually. In the rest of the world, people are not so focused on sweet coffee as they are on plain or unflavored coffee, which is the number 2 for Southeast Asia. And for tea, what we found was that herbal, fruity, sweet, and floral tea flavors were most favored in Asia, whereas in the rest of the world, it was for fruity and herbal. So we could see that the taste preferences in Southeast Asia are quite different really from those of the average of the rest of the world. Thai consumers most likely to be interested in craft beverages. We've seen how they're interested in fizzy drinks, premium fizzy drinks. Well, that also extends to craft beverages and craft beers in particular as well. And they're also more likely to buy sophisticated soft drink alternatives to alcohol. So this is where perhaps some of the more premium markets have the opportunities once the country recovers. So we've had a look at some of the lifestyle preferences from the region. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at whether there are any concerns about these additives and health issues that come up with the drinks, and see if there's any lessons to be learned from this. So first of all, and this is interesting when we looked at the fact that tea and coffee flavors seem to have people were particularly interested in sweet flavors for tea and coffee. Whereas we see that within the region, most consumers claim to be looking to reduce sugar consumption. And in Southeast Asia, you can see Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand in particular say they're looking to reduce sugar consumption more so than the regional average. Boomers are the most sugar conscious, and when we looked at it by gender, what we saw is it's 47% of females in the age range of 45 to 64, who indicated very strong preferences for reducing their sugar consumption. For artificial flavors and colorings, Indonesia and Philippines consumers say they really want to reduce their consumption of these. And by generation, it was Gen Y, the millennials, who said that they were trying to reduce consumption, and particularly females in the age range of 25 to 34. Indonesia and Philippines consumers say they're looking to avoid artificial sweeteners, more so than the Asia Pacific average, whereas we can see Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, perhaps not quite so interested in this. And by generation, it was Gen Y looking to avoid artificial sweeteners, again, females aged 25 to 34. And this then makes me wonder, if females so against sugar and also against artificial sweeteners, why is it that coffee and tea the preference seems to be for the sweet flavors in Southeast Asia? So maybe they're indicating ideally what they would try to be doing, but the reality is once they're actually in the store or in the restaurant, they go for the sweet cafe lattes. So now we're going to look at the perceptions of the health benefits of the drinks ingredients in the region, see if there's any nuggets of information we can glean from this about what people should be putting into drinks. So most respondents in Southeast Asia, certainly more so than the Asia Pacific average on the bottom, think that botanicals or plants are good for the health, with the exception of Singapore, again, where the people aren't perhaps quite so health conscious as the rest of the region. When we looked at it by generation, Gen Y and then followed by Gen X were particularly interested in this, and mostly females, the age 25 to 44 were quite keen on this as well. Indonesia and Philippines very conscious of the health benefits of vitamins, although if you look at the numbers here, you see the Asia Pacific average is 75%, and although Singapore is slightly less than that, and Thailand and Vietnam, the reality is that at least 75% of people in the region are conscious of the health benefits of vitamins, but particularly is Indonesia and Philippines. Here it's the older generations that are particularly interested in it. More than 80% of both silent and the boomers agree it's positive for health, and particularly the older females in the age range of 55 to 64. Southeast Asia consumers, way more so in almost all cases than the Asia Pacific average, seem to think that antioxidants are going to be good for their health. And when we looked at it by generation, it was the Gen X and Gen Y, especially females aged 25 to 34, who are quite keen on antioxidants. Southeast Asia respondents much more likely than the Asia Pacific average of 30%. So Southeast Asia respondents getting up to about 42% think that high fructose corn syrup is good for health. And Gen Y certainly seem to believe that high fructose corn syrup is positive for health, so especially females in the age range of 25 to 34. So what I want to do now is just look at this through another dimension. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at ASEAN consumer support of social causes compared with the Asia Pacific average, but also compared against China in the north and Australia in the south. So we can get a sense of whether consumers are focused on other issues when it comes to support for brands, or the sort of brands that they're going to be ordering both in the restaurants and also in the supermarkets. So ASEAN consumers are much more likely to pay for products and services that support environmental protection. So in the middle, we've got ASEAN consumers 87% against China consumers 84%, and Australian consumers are 60% saying yes to, would you consider paying more for products or services that support environment protection. The Asia Pacific average for this was 79%, so ASEAN consumers are above that. When it comes to paying more for products or services support fair trade, ASEAN consumers, yes, they're way up on that, 81%. The Asia Pacific average was 72%. China a bit less, Australia quite a bit less as well. When we ask, say, would you stop buying brands and products and values you don't subscribe to your personal beliefs, don't align with your personal beliefs? Asia Pacific average is 60%. ASEAN respondents a bit more, 65%. Australian a bit less, and China the most actually, there 67%. For the question, the respondents saying I strongly agree or somewhat agree to, I want brands to actively address global social issues such as racism, sexism, etc. The Asia Pacific average for this, 62%. ASEAN respondents more so, 68%. Australian much less, 46%. China the most actually though, with 72%. For promoting diversity, the Asia Pacific average was 70%. ASEAN respondents 77%. Australia much less, and China is the most actually, 82%, which is interesting considering the relative lack of diversity, I suppose, in their corporate life there in China. ASEAN and China consumers most likely to stop buying brands if they're not treating workers ethically in the supply chain. The Asia Pacific average is 66% for this. And again, ASEAN respondents seem to be quite keen on this. China a bit more so, and Australia a bit less. So let's have a summary then of the key findings by country. So in the top left, Singapore, we're expecting Singapore to recover first from the COVID situation and to experience a jump in tourism sales. We think there'll be good support for pubs, clubs and bars because there's a lot of domestic consumption for that. Plus, of course, they'll get the tourism bump. And there's strong support for foreign brands for all drinks there. Philippines underneath, there's going to be a later recovery from COVID, but eventually high growth for alcohol in the pub sector. We saw that big compound annual growth rebound from about 2023. Consumers there do enjoy drinking alcohol. Strong support for foreign brands. They want to buy more fruit-based drinks. They're likely to buy large quantities of coffee as well. Underneath, Thailand, consumers there enjoy drinking alcohol. Strong support for foreign brands for alcohol, but not so much for the soft drinks, where people are quite happy with private label or other labels there. They like craft beverages. They like fizzy drinks. They like large quantities of coffee and also large quantities of juice drinks as well. Malaysia, perhaps a slightly later recovery from COVID, although their vaccination rate is not so bad. Limited support for pubs, clubs and bars and drinking alcohol, obviously because it's an Islamic country. Strong support for premium juice brands. They want to buy more fruit-based drinks. Indonesia, very similar in the limited market for pubs, clubs and bars and for alcohol. And again, strong support for juice brands. I think they see juice as perhaps the alternative, and fruit-based drinks. but they're also likely to spend on premium coffee brands. And then Vietnam, later recovery from COVID, they're having a very difficult situation with it right now. Good support for pubs, clubs, and bars and drinking alcohol in general. Strong support for foreign brands, and likely to buy large quantities of juice drinks as well. So the key findings, the ASEAN markets I've seen are more likely than Asia Pacific average to favor foreign brands, especially the younger generation seem to like that. The on-trade market for alcohol, Singapore is going to recover first in the region with the strong domestic consumption, early opening to tourism. Philippines will recover later, but with the biggest growth rate for on-trade alcohol. Females are very health conscious and seem to be reading labels more diligently. ASEAN markets seem to be more health conscious than the rest of Asia Pacific. The consumers claim to be motivated by sustainability and social causes in their choice of brands. And ASEAN markets are very different drink tastes to the rest of the world, as we've seen. Younger ASEAN consumers are most likely to want to try new flavors and varieties of drinks. And with that, my last slide, what I'll do then is hand back to the team to take over for Q&A or the next session. Thank you very much.